The novel Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury goes into depth on a lot of ideas and even incorporates some themes such as censorship, authoritarian rule, and intimacy. The concept of intimacy is one that is often understood as an emotional trait, something of a personal or private nature, something familiar, at least according to Merriam-Webster. Barry Moss and Andrew Schwebel give intimacy a quantitative examination in their journal Marriage and Romantic Relationships, Defining Intimacy in Romantic Relationships. Moss is a postdoctoral fellow in psychology at the University of Washington, and Andrew Schwebel is a psychology professor at Ohio State University. In their journal, they analyze test subjects' themes that define intimacy. Of the 7 themes, 3 are worth analyzing further to connect them to the concept of intimacy: communication, in-depth affective awareness, and the generalized sense of closeness to one another.
Moss, page 33.
The 2 authors look to other definitions of the concept to connect themes to it. Writer Jay Nowinski says intimacy is getting close. It means opening up, which means being vulnerable.
Moss, page 32.
Which is supported by James Eshelman, a professor of pathology, and Juan A. Clark, a sociology professor at Wilfrid Laurier University, when they stated that intimacy refers to any close association or friendship that involves informal warmth, openness, and sharing.
Moss, 32.
Our first topic is communication, which doesn't really define intimacy. Instead, it kind of causes it. Moss states that committed romantic relationships can exist without intimacy, and it is the action of communication that's promoting intimacy within that relationship.
Moss, 33.
You can look to the characters in Fahrenheit 451 to better understand what kind of communication drives intimacy. For example, the McClellans. Now, this family communicated every moment they could. They spoke to each other often. Clarice even states in the novel that the people in her living room are usually her family just talking to each other.
Bradbury, page 7.
There is a feeling of closeness through this, that they can depend on each other to listen, and this communication is one way that intimacy is formed in a family household. An example that proves the claim by demonstrating the opposite of what the McClellans were like would be the Montags. This family is an example of one without intimacy. Guy and Mildred have very stiff conversations and can't really speak to each other. Like the day following Mildred's overdose, Guy couldn't really seem to talk to her about it.
Bradbury, page 16 and 18.
Their communication is limited, as Mildred forms an ingenuine intimacy with the family on her television, as presented by David Seed in his journal titled The Flight from the Good Life, Fahrenheit 451 in the context of American post-war dystopias.
Seed, page 229.
Through the McClellans and the Montags, our understanding of communication's role in forming intimacy in a relationship is strengthened. Another theme found in Moss and Schwebel's research was in-depth affective awareness/expressiveness, which can be better understood as our ability to interpret emotion as well as express emotion. Not only does it lend a helping hand to empathy, but also lends a hand to, forming intimate relationships. Take Clarice and Guy, for example. Early on in their newly found relationship, a conversation of theirs takes a turn when Clarice points out that she's upset Guy with one of her questions. Despite him denying, she claims to feel his emotion in the tone of his voice.
Bradbury, page 20.
This anger from Guy does not last long, as he's forgotten about it one page later, but her detection of that emotion is evident of the intimacy of their relationship. The final most important theme behind intimacy is
emotional closeness, that sense of familiarity and personal connection. Moss, page 30.
The relationship that most explicitly showed this was the relationship between Guy Montag and Clarice McClellan. In the novel, Montag says to Clarice,
"Why is it I feel I've known you so many years?" Page 26. There's that familiarity. Her response is, "We know each other."
Seemingly summarizing all those themes in just one quote, this part of the story really defines intimacy. When comparing the relationship between Guy and Clarice and Guy and his wife, it's clear to see what kind of role intimacy plays in a relationship. Mildred's relationship with the family on her television is much more intimate than her relationship with her husband, and this is apparent through the closeness and communication she has with them, mainly when she kind of talks about them by name and has conversations with them.
Bradbury, page 18.
The story also showed a strong emphasis of intimacy in a family setting. Now, although they had a short presence in the story, the McClellans were a prime example of what intimacy in a family looks like. Their intimate moments are what helped make them such a close family. According to Moss and Schwebel,
the intimacy helps the family communicate and understand each other. Moss, 36.
A family in Fahrenheit that is lacking in intimacy would be the family of Mrs. Bowles. Her relationship with her children is directly due to the lack of intimacy. She plunks her children in school 9 days out of 10, only putting up with them 3 days a month, which they spend at the parlor walls. Bradbury, pages 92 to 93. Through this, it can be inferred that she not only does not empathize with her children, but she also does not bother to communicate with them. This lack of communication will lead to a separation between the two and eventually leave no room for intimacy to heal their broken family. Alright. But what's it all mean? Well, ultimately, trying to take Moss and Schrebel's definition of intimacy and trying to make sense of it without examples or being able to apply it to certain people is difficult. Looking to the examples in Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 is crucial to being able to really develop your understanding of the definition. The book's examples really put on display how intimacy affects not only families but romantic relationships. With this balance between families who communicate and partners that are completely devoid of conversation, the reader of this novel can begin to understand the concept of intimacy through this specific lens.
Get a good grip on your nerve.
This video is brought to you by UCR, Uber Cool Readers.